This is the Team Objection Podcast for August 23rd, 2022, episode 542. It's a weird one, I admit. If you watched the show last week, you kind of knew we were headed down a strange road, and we've gotten here now. We are on the road, but technically I've already gone on the road. Look, it's complicated, but as this is airing on a Tuesday night or a Thursday for the podcast version, I'm actually already in Colorado. So right now I'm there, but I'm here.
Future self is in Colorado. I just had a whole bunch of things fall off my desk that I'm really not sure what actually fell off my desk. So things are just swimming along right now. This is just fantastic.
No, I like this. This is like an era of intrigue now, where we don't know what's going to happen. Anything could go wrong at any time.
I still have Burger King coupons on my desk, though. So if anybody wants Burger King coupons, they can have that. I probably should throw these away because I will never go to Burger King again because nope.
I was going to say, Are you actually going to use those? Because if not, why do you have them?
No, they just came in the mail and I just haven't wait. That's all.
We had that happen at work, and I guess, part of that was pandemic related, but there's, the break room, and somebody put up like a whole sheet of Peter Piper pizza coupons, and absolutely zero of those got pulled off the wall.
Yep. There's a thing of Firehouse subs on my wall at work right now, and I'm like, those expire at the end of the month, and no one's used them yet.
Yep.
Weird.
And you still have people in the office regularly. I don't even have that going right now.
Yeah, there's plenty of people in the office, but I mean, I don't know. So that's okay. Now you've unlocked a thing. Subway is like going nuts with their advertising lately. Like, I don't know what their advertising budget is for celebrities, but they have Simone Biles, Steph Curry, Charles Barkley, Tony Romo, Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady. Who else am I thinking of that they so huge names out there. And yet my desire to go into a Subway is still zero. I haven't been to a Subway in years, and I don't want to change that anytime soon.
I go once every few months.
Ugh,
I don't know why. Something about it it's either quick or something about it strikes me like, I remember when I did like them for a while, so maybe it'll be different.
There's something where I've gone. I don't know. I've gone to other sub places, but on their commercials, they have like some subs that I'm just like, ooh, that does sound good. And then I look at them and go, no, that's just a different combination of the same meats. It's the Taco Bell problem. Like Taco Bell releases this brand new burrito taco. It's like this new cheesy beef. I'm like, you just took existing ingredients and put them together differently. You bastards.
And if you don't like that root ground beef, then you're in for a bad time because everything on the menu is going to come back to that for the most part.
For the most part, there's chicken, there's steak, and there's that ground beef. And where else are you going from there?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the original question, where do they get the budget? I don't know. It does seem like it ramped up, basically starting around the Super Bowl. That's when this campaign essentially launched. And then ever since then, it's just been more and more iterations. I'm sure there's a least common denominator factor here where business must be doing pretty well. I mean, they keep tweaking their menu and stuff, but I don't know. Look, right now on my desk, I have this.
Oh, God.
People who are not the viewers, it's a Subway gift card.
Oh, God.
And it was very nice of my brother to get me that for Christmas, so I don't have any hate for that whatsoever. But I haven't used it yet.
It's August.
It is August. Now, I have been to Subway once this year, and I forgot the gift card. And I'm sure, use it eventually. Because, again, I used to go there quite a bit. It was not a bad idea for a gift. It's just, chains in general. I mean, Raising Cane's, I guess, is the exception. I go there maybe a couple times a month at most. Other than that, I'm not really going any place that's national anymore.
National places I go are Chick-fil-A because the kids like it. In-N-Out when I want a fast hamburger because they're still pretty good, and Chipotle because I like just chicken rice mixture. It's about it. Like, I'm trying to think of other chain restaurants. I'm like, nope. Applebee's, nope. We already did this through our whole restaurant competition, but yeah, I'm not doing anything else pretty much.
Yeah. I don't miss a lot of it. I miss the idea of liking Wendy's. For a 4 or 5 year span, I was probably going there 2-3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And now the rare times I go, I'm just disappointed by the whole thing. And now it's gotten to the point where, I mean, if we're going to be like old men and just go into this topic fully, why would I want to pay $14 at McDonald's?
That's the thing that blows my mind when I see a row of cars like wrapped around McDonald's. It's like force of habit that people go, but I look at them like, so your Big Mac combo is $10.85 now for a Big Mac, medium fries, and medium drink. That's insane. Like 1085, no thanks. Not doing that.
It's a bygone time and there's inflation and thanks Joe Biden and all that. But like, the value menu's gone. We've talked a few different times on the show about different things that we used to assemble, whether it was when you and Andy worked there or like me, again, going to Wendy's a lot in college because it was cheap. You could get a 5-piece nugget for 99 cents. You could stack that up for $5, right? And now it's like, if it's
25 nuggets.
if it's not cheap, then what the hell's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I guess relative to other places, because if you go to a sit down restaurant nowadays, it's going to be $14 at least for a plate of something. A Mexican food restaurant, forget going to Mexican food restaurants. You've got $18 to $20 a plate for the most minuscule things nowadays, which is going to be like generations below us talk about like the difficulties of right now with like trying to start your life. I can't even imagine that. Like we got at least a little bit of a base under us, of earning power in the last 10 years. I don't know if I was just coming out of college right now. Ugh, I don't know what I'd be doing.
Yeah, that could be its own discussion too. Just the value of a college degree, the being saddled with student debt that may or may not be forgiven. Who knows?
I mean, I keep hearing update. They're going to have an update. Biden will have an update by the end of the month of what he's going to do about college debt. The pause is ending. And
spoiler alert, it's just going to kick the can further down the road. That's all we're going to see.
I feel like we're going to be like, well, you can continue not making payments for another 4 months. And then we'll see what happens after midterms. Which is a really stupid idea if you really want to pass that agenda, because who knows what's going to happen after November.
Yeah, I would not be optimistic about their ability to further enact change after the midterms if you're the Democrats. So it does seem like this would be the time. But then they could risk doing something deeply unpopular.
Deeply unpopular, like depending on which base you talk to, anything you do is unpopular. I think that rainbows are wonderful to look at. What a horrible statement to say! How could anyone like color?
So this was something I was going to go into, and we've sort of gone about it in a roundabout way.
We talked about food first. It's weird.
That's right, and it's a strange roadmap that we're on, but it's what happens when there's no planner. So now it's just free form.
Oh, nothing over there.
I won't go into super details, and I'm not sitting here trying to like name drop because that's not what this is about. But I did have a sit down with a state representative just this past week. He's the one who represents our district, and it was kind of eye-opening in a sense. I had not met him personally. I'm certainly familiar with him. He's been in this area for 6 or 7 years and around northern Arizona for like 20 now, so a known commodity. But just kind of getting his perspective, because we had more of an off-the-record kind of conversation, which now, of course, I could be ruining by going on some other record. But that's why I'm not going into specifics. The point is, it's eye-opening hearing somebody talk more frankly about it. It was refreshing in a way because it's just kind of like, yeah, like this climate's really hard to work in. And the point I brought up, which I don't think is original in any way, but like it was the most concise way I've thought of yet, is just to say we can't even agree on facts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We can't even find a basis for conversation in facts. We can't even have 2 + 2 = 4 because now the other part of the conversation is, well, I feel like it's 5. I believe it's 6. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you believe. There is no viewpoint on this. It is just 4. You can argue about whether we should be adding 2 + 2 or what the basis of this conversation might be. But like at the end of the day, the number is 4. But because we can't even come to terms with that, how in the hell are we going to tackle a more complicated issue like abortion or anything else that actually has some wiggle room for beliefs in it? And the answer is, I don't know.
The idea of polarization, the idea that I am going to entrench myself in a camp and that's it, and I'm going to find my story where I want to find it. I've had times where I've tried to reflect on myself and I wonder if I'm putting myself in a box, if I'm putting embodying a stereotype that people might think about me. And I try to reflect on that myself and be like, I don't want to represent a stereotype necessarily. I want to branch out. I want to learn different things. So I always try to look up different news sources. I always try to look up different sides. I always try to take the opposing viewpoint in. Even when I think one way, I always want to think like, what would someone else think about this? Because I want to find a middle ground. I want to find an idea of like, why would someone think so heavily about this? And then the flip side of that seems to be people of just being like, well, nope, this is my guy and that's what he says and therefore that's what I'm doing. Oh, this guy's supported by my guy? All right, going that way. It's just insane to me. Like the amount of Trump endorsed signs I see as the reason you vote for someone, especially here in Arizona, it seems. Like you might have great ideas sometimes, but geez, I don't want to vote for you just because one other person says that I endorse that person. It doesn't make sense to me.
And, endorsements have always been a
A
bit
thing.
of a political football.
Yeah.
In some ways, they were bigger in the old days. Just recently, I was asked, if our paper intends to do endorsements, which would really just come from me, and my answer is no, for a couple different reasons. One, a time commitment, because there's no way I would ever half-ass it. Like I'm not just gonna be like, dart at a dartboard, I'm endorsing you. So it would take a ton of research to really make a well-informed opinion about it. But also because a lot of newspapers and other media outlets aren't doing that anymore. Because to me, I don't know if they resonate. To me, it's like, okay, the Arizona Republic picks this person. Does that change the way I think about how I'm going to approach voting? No, because I already have my own opinions. Now, maybe I'm different than the electorate in that I'm already kind of tapped in and like aware. But to me, it's like it doesn't. Whether it's a paper, an individual, I don't really have any additional sway from it. There is, of course, one bigger figure than normal looming over this whole process. He who does not need to be named. But even so, it does feel kind of like, okay, and also like, is it just going to be you're just going to go down and vote for every single person that they vote for? Is it really that simple?
I mean, I can imagine some people might lean that way. I don't know. I never want someone else to make my decision for me. I want to have a wide range of opinions, and I take what I think makes sense out of those opinions and make my choice based off of that. It takes a lot of work sometimes, though, and a lot of thought process. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
And it's frustrating to me because in 2020, I voted for at least a handful of Republicans on the ballot.
Hmm.
I'd say it probably leaned more Democrat, but also there were several races like, the council up here that are supposed to be nonpartisan. Now, I and a lot of people know where their allegiances actually lie, but you don't run based on a party, you just run on whatever. Um, I with some of the candidates that advanced in the August primaries for Arizona, it was the more extreme option, which I'm not going to go for. So Blake Masters, no,
Yeah. Sorry.
non-starter. Carrie Lake, absolutely not. Now I've actually met Katie Hobbs a couple times. I can't say I'm a huge fan of the prospect of her as governor, but considering the alternative, for me it's a no-brainer because now it's not even just like, oh, well, you support Trump or you're a Republican, because I don't really care about that stuff that much if I'm being honest. But the fact that you're willing to go to these lengths to show fealty to someone who's not even in power right now, who knows if he will be again in 2024, that to me is a massive, massive red flag.
It's well, also there's a certain amount of hypocrisy that comes from the idea of I'm going to run under an electorate while the entire time saying that an election was stolen and that there's fraud happening. It seems hypocritical to be like, all right, I won this election, so therefore it's good, or I lost this election, therefore it's fake. There's a playbook that's already been used, but it just doesn't feel right to me. It feels to undermine the entire process, no matter the result.
And it's interesting how that argument goes away when you get the results you want.
Yeah.
Because on election night, hell, we even talked about it because we did an episode of the show on the primary. It was the game show. So I remember my brain being fried after that night. But after the show was over, we sometimes just linger and talk because we're friends. And one of the things that came up was that Lake was down by, I think, maybe 8 or 9% on election night. Now, a lot of that is because what are the earliest results coming in? The mail-in ballots. Those automatically trigger as soon as the polls close, effectively, or basically an hour after. So those come flooding in, and then as the remainder of the results are counted from either the drop-off ballots that day or people voting in person, things can change. This, of course, was a prime example because the number of people who came in person leaned Republican, like hard Republican, like Carrie Lake Republican, so that when the morning came, Lake was already ahead by a slim margin, and then eventually that gap widened a little bit, and she won. What does all
Which
this mean? Well, it's because you're trying to undermine faith in the entire process. So that's twofold. One, maybe by discouraging people to come in the first place if they feel like their vote doesn't matter, or by making it difficult for them to get to the polls. And two, by then calling into question the results every time you lose. And Lake, on the night of the election, when she was down 8 or 9%, talked about irregularities, even though she didn't mention what those were whatsoever, and the fact that everything just didn't feel right. And some of that she was right about. She did rally and ultimately end up winning, but some of it was planting seeds for if she had lost. And that's a huge problem.
it's the biggest problem. And the funny thing is, I remember that night, and I remember looking and thinking like, "Oh, good, she lost. I'm kind of glad that the election denier lost." And then, oops, that didn't happen. So now it's going to be really interesting to see what type of sway Arizona goes in this November, with the sense of the fact they actually voted blue this past presidential election for the first time in a very long time. And we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how far extreme this state can go.
We have I'm okay with Katie Hobbs. I'm not really thrilled about the prospect of voting for her, but again, that's not something I'm going to lose much sleep over considering the alternative. But then like Mark Kelly is a relatively centrist Democrat in this state, at least relatively as much as you can by any standards in 2022. I think he has a decent chance to get his seat back, but I don't know because across the country the idea is the Democrats are going to get whooped in the midterms. And they probably are. That's relatively normal for the way the two-party system works. There's this ebb and flow to it. So when somebody wins a certain amount, eventually everybody else goes, "Oh, well, that's bad. So we need to come out next time." I, if you had asked me back in like December how I thought the midterms were going to go, I would have thought the Democrats were going to get absolutely walloped.
Mm-hmm.
But now, because of the attacks on Roe v. Wade, I think that might bolster the Democrats' chances. On the flip side, the economy is still pretty terrible, which I think is a tremendous thorn in the Democrats' side as they head into a midterm election, because that's the one thing I think you can say. Maybe people who are just adamantly anti-Trump would not admit this. The economy was good under Trump. It really was. And maybe you could say, well, of course it had to be. He comes from business. Like, that's the lowest bar to set. I mean, fine. But it was.
Mm-hmm.
And when you poll voters about what they're most concerned about going forward, that's the number one or number two on every list. It's how bad the economy is and who's going to fix it. So I don't know what to make of November. It's pretty obvious that it's going to be controversial no matter what. But is it going to be a red wave? Maybe. I don't know.
That was the biggest problem for me, what Trump brought, because there was a lot of policies actually that he laid out that I'm like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. I actually like that. And like you said, economy is good. If I could have separated the bully from the policymaker and just gone with just the policymaker as the politician, we might have actually had a pretty decent president, but we couldn't get rid of the bully. We couldn't get rid of the loudmouth. We couldn't get rid of the, well, I have to win every single conversation. I have to win this handshake right now. It's like, please stop. Like, just stop that, and we could actually do something good here. But couldn't happen. And now that's given birth to a wave of people trying to follow in those footsteps without the charisma, without the presence. And it's taken over a party that I used to identify with a lot more. And it sucks.
And just so that we're being equal opportunity, I also want to take this chance to call out Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
One of the sentiments I see, and I understand to an extent, is the idea that because a lot of people on the right seem to be so far gone, it's not even worth trying to hold a conversation with or include them in policy making, because they're frankly just not even worth. Like, they're not going to sway them whatsoever. Their views are so dangerous, as they would put it, that there's no benefit to it. That you're just supposed to be like, the hell with that. Let's push them out of the room. We'll win back power and we'll figure it out. I can understand why you would believe that. And again, for me, I'm not having certain rights attacked, so I have the privilege of not necessarily having to be like, I feel these on an intimately personal level. But I will say this, regardless of that, I think that is tremendously dangerous, and it's kind of part of the reason why Trump got into office in the first place. Because whether or not you agree with that subset of the population, they exist. And whether you like it or not, they're part of the electorate. And if you completely push them aside, they're only going to try and push those views home stronger. So to me, and this is kind of something that I think Dave will agree with as well, like, we're centrists. I'm an independent. To me, I'm like, you're going to have to try and find common ground. I know that's harder than it's ever been before in some ways, but you're going to have to try and find something, because you can't just shun an entire group of people. We saw what happened in 2018 when we tried to pull that.
I've said that for a long time when it comes to, when a lot of the for lack of a better term, I'll say woke movement kind of started towards the middle to late part of the 2010s, where there was a lot of talk about, just more open talk about different parts of culture, but different people that maybe were more silent before, which I'm fine with people voicing their lifestyles and being what they want to be. But there was almost this sentiment of like some people would be on social media, some people would be on different areas and try to find out information coming from a place of ignorance where they truly just don't know and like almost get shot down for trying to ask questions. And it was just like you are shutting out the very people that are you want to ally yourself or to have as allies with you. And by showing this level of like elitism, almost, I guess is the best word, just shuts people out and then turns, like you said, this whole subset of people who exist now in this bubble of like, well, these people just, they want to have this new world order. They want to have this new method of thinking and they're changing everything and I don't like it. And then we can't even come to middle ground because they won't even talk to each other, try to teach the other one what they're thinking. And it's been going on for a while and just been getting kind of more present as we go.
Mm-hmm. And I get it. This became prominent, and I think we might have even talked about it on the show once during Black Lives Matter. The idea that, okay, so in addition to trying to figure out where you stand and to push your own power forward and make your movement known, you're also supposed to be responsible for educating white guy Greg about why this systemic problem still exists and all the multitude of reasons that is pervaded for all these years. Like, maybe he should go figure it out himself instead of making it incumbent upon you to. So I get that viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really want to enact meaningful change, I think there's going to have to be some level of maybe that person was going to be receptive to it and has no idea where to turn to because it's not a form of experience that they've had in the past. So they don't know what sources to go to get that information, to get that background, to really learn and open themselves up to it. That doesn't mean it's fair. You shouldn't have to be in a position where you're having to explain the awful things that have happened to you, whether it's that one example or any other. But fair may not have anything to do with it, because if it was fair, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. It might be extremely tiring. I understand that. I'm not saying anybody should feel like they have to do it, but if you have an opportunity, if there's somebody who really is receptive, I think you have to take advantage of it, even if it is a bit cumbersome.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to enact, I guess, meaningful change in some people. Now, one person at a time is not an efficient way of doing it, but I see a lot of times where people say something like, well, Google's free. Well, that doesn't really help that much. Like, great, Google's free. What's the question? What answer do I want to look at? Because there's going to be a multitude of answers if you figure out what question you want to ask. So it's not that simple. Just be like, all right, well, Google's free. Go figure out the answer for yourself. It's a lot of work on both sides, unfortunately. And now the burden should be probably placed on the person who wants to learn. But still, if you want to have meaningful change, that might be the method you have to do is teach people.
Yeah. And look, again, we are fortunate in that we don't have to deal with a lot of this. But when I'm trying to learn about something new, yes, I read a lot, but partly because just the nature of my job, obviously. But the things I'm going to remember are generally not something I'm going to read off of Wikipedia or just some random news article. What I'm going to remember is people's experiences. The lasting image of BLM in Flagstaff, which was nowhere near what it was in plenty of other cities across the country, was the fact that we had something like 1,500 or 2,000 people just walking down Milton, like the main street of Flagstaff, for people who don't know, just blocking traffic and like really making their presence known. Those images have stuck with me in a way that reading stories didn't. It's going to be the same thing with anything else, where it's like if you have an experience that has deeply troubled you, I kind of want to hear it, even if it's uncomfortable, because that's going to stick with me. That's going to make me think and reevaluate in a way that some static article isn't. And again, that may not be fair, and for some people that's traumatic to dredge up things like that. So I'm not saying that everybody just has to jump in and roll up your sleeves and teach everybody the way, but like if you're in a position where you're comfortable to talk about it, even if it gets repetitive or tiring to do it, like to me, I'm like, you got to advocate for a cause no matter what it is, whether it's one of suffering or just education. If you can't advocate for it, you can't win anybody over. And as Dave said, it might be one by one, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, it's funny. I think of things if you work for a large company, if you are in or calling someone in a call center, or like working over a chat message through a company through something. If you don't see or hear that person, it's so much easier to be rude to them. It's so much easier to dehumanize them because it's just a chat box on the other side of your screen. Like that's what you see. And so I wish people were more, one, willing to understand that when you hear these stories, you read about these stories, that these are people's experiences. And two, step out of your bubble, man. Like go to like try to be out in different places. Try to experience other things than your group of people that you hang out with that all have the same beliefs. I don't mean to pick on this, but like church groups, for example, sometimes people like that's their tight-knit community is in there, which is great. Communities are important. Churches are important for that community instance. But sometimes when that's your only bubble of people you talk to, it's real easy to get groupthink really fast and then do an us versus them type of deal. And woof, that's where you run into a lot of problems when that happens.
I don't sit here and pretend like I have all the answers. Clearly, I don't. I just know, like, whether it's the stories or something visual, like, even. So, this is sort of counter to the example I just gave, but, like, recently there was a slideshow the Associated Press did, because we're coming up on, I think, 6 months of the engagement in Ukraine. And it was some of the more graphic images. They had a warning on the post about, like, some of these are going to be rough. And there was a part of me that was like, I don't know if I need to see that. And then I was like, I think, especially as we've gotten further into this conflict, like, I kind of do. I need to remind myself about the atrocities that are being committed in this country that were the main news cycle for at least a couple of weeks. And it felt like kind of just fell into the background. And I get it. It's halfway across the world. It doesn't have any impact on our day-to-day lives. But I'm like, I want to remind myself, like you said, to be uncomfortable, to be put under pressure, to escape a bubble. I wanted to see them, not because I got some joy in it. They were horrifying. And, there are some people who probably like that stuff, and that's another topic. But, like, I wanted to see it to be uncomfortable, to be reminded of, to be frank, to use the church term, the blessings that in many ways that we/I have. Because it's a lot easier just to be like, doesn't affect me. It's like, maybe not, but there's going to come a time where there is something that does affect you. And the easiest example we have of that is the pandemic. We finally found the thing that united everybody, whether it united them or not. We all had this shared experience. We finally found something, because I don't know if there was a lot else in our lifetimes that compared to that. There's going to be other examples, whether it's because there's going to be some climate change caused inferno in the next 50 years or some other political thing. I don't know. But there's going to come a time where you're going to want your voice to be heard, your story to be told. You better hope somebody's listening.
It was weird that almost 21 years ago, we're coming up on another anniversary of September 11th. So almost 21 years ago, I don't remember ever a time where people were more united. Like at that moment and those months after, it felt like every single person was united in the same way. Now, the circumstances of that sucked. That's not the reason you want everyone to be united, but for that short period of time, it felt like everybody was completely united. And since then, the division has grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. So there is now just camps that you feel like you have to put yourself in. And then if you don't put yourself in those, you feel like you're in your own meandering camp of your own, where like you're not part of any camp, so therefore you're just an outcast of those two camps. And I wish there was just more going between those camps, more trying to figure out what those camps are about.
We've sort of peddled this from the very start of the show, the gray area, the not black and white. You're right. Why do I not think of 9/11 that way? Because it didn't even cross my mind when I said the sentence, and you pointed out it's kind of dumb, but like maybe it's because of what's happened since. There was that, I don't know, weeks, if not maybe even months long period where
Rest of the year almost.
it didn't feel like patriotism was performative,
Mm-hmm.
and people of very different backgrounds or political leanings did just kind of come together because no matter what your feelings were overall, it was an attack on all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But then that faded. And that's going to be true of anything, right? I think I even made a point on this podcast years ago after my grandma died to be like, this was a reminder, like, you got to make sure you take advantage of these opportunities and, like, call your relatives when you get a chance to check in and make sure you really spend time when you can. I'm not saying I haven't done that. Have I gone the extra mile? I don't know. I mean, maybe compared to some people, I don't know. But, like, all of these things, we're human. So it always takes a more harsh reminder to get back on track sometimes. I think that's what I struggle with now is I don't know what our current reminder is going to have to be to get us out of this situation.
I guess I don't know. Sometimes you have to think on sometimes a more personal scale and then try to extrapolate that out. I mean, I just had to go. I just went yesterday to visit my grandma who is doing not quite well, and is I don't know. I don't know if this is the last time I was going to see her yesterday. I don't know how that's going to go. She's 92 years old and very weak and feeble, and I don't know what's going to happen. But like I'm trying to put that into my perspective of like, hey, that was a life, you know, it was a long life that happened long before me, and it's coming to an end, and we're all going to come to an end sometime. So kind of got to make the most of what you've got in this time. So the amount of anger I see just is not conducive for people having long, happy, healthy lives.
I was in sort of a similar situation. My grandpa came up here in April, and just for a bit, maybe 3-4 hours, because he was staying nearby, and my aunt drove him up just to kind of be up here for a meal. And it wasn't the last time I saw him, but I only had one or two other chances, and one of those when he was in the hospital. At least he was there. He was cognizant, like he was having a hard time speaking, but it was him. His personality was in there, mental acuity was there, like it was him. So at least there was that, because then he passed away about a week and a half later. I never really talked about it on the show. It was different with my grandma because when she was in the hospital, she wasn't there.
Yeah.
And at times she would almost be like she was on the verge, she was close. But for the most part, she was still like hallucinating because she was still seeing like the firemen who came to get her when she fell in the bathroom a couple years before that. And sometimes it was like she wasn't there at all. Why am I bringing any of that up? It's just because like you just never know. You just don't. So, obviously I'm hoping the best for your grandma. I was fortunate in that I got to spend 32 and 37 years with that set. 3 of the 6 I have are still alive, and I'm 38. So like 37. But so like it I'm fortunate. Some people barely knew their grandparents. I had a great grandparent alive till I was like 8. So this is a very softy, long-winded way of saying like, yeah, maybe value those experiences, whether they're the small or the big, the family or the outside. And then also don't spend so much time directing hatred into something that doesn't affect your day-to-day life. Focus on what really matters.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. That's deep and rough to think about what's going to be coming forward just in that instance for me, and then just the future is always such a weird conundrum of happy and and weird.
I mean, look, I'll say the same thing that I've been saying to my family about these 2 grandparents in particular. I hope for nothing but the best for your grandma, that, she's got another decade ahead of her, or I don't know, 80 years in some weird Futurama situation. I don't know. But if not, at the very least, even at this moment, like she had a full life. You got to cherish your time with her. She got to watch your 3 kids come into the world and get to know them at least on a meaningful level. When all 3 of them, I think, well, at least 2 of them should remember her for sure, even if something were to happen. Like
Yep.
that stuff's awesome, and it's hard to quantify. But like, there is a little part of me now that's like, well, they never got to see me get married. Whoops. I guess I screwed up. Like little stuff, and I don't second guess any of it because of it. But at least I can look back and think, well, they were there for my graduation. They were there for like these other really critical moments of my life, and they also were basically raising me off and on for the better part of like 3 years while my mom was putting herself through medical school when I was a single mom. So like, they were invaluable to my life. I cherish the time I had with them, and when they did go, both of them, it was their time. I at least, as much as I miss them, I at least can be like, they were both struggling. They were both not in good health. And when they both went relatively peacefully. The one I don't know, I haven't had to do and hope never to have to, and sympathize with the people who do, is the sudden ones. The heart attacks, the accidents, the stuff where you don't see it coming and you have no writing on the wall and something's taken from you. I've not experienced that. My sympathy goes out to those who have, because that's one that, I don't know. With both grandparents, I could be like, I was hoping they were going to make it, but when they passed, I was like, yeah, I'm
Yeah, it's gonna
sad, but
happen.
like I'm kind of relieved, not happy, but at least kind of like it was okay, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I had to go through that with Courtney's dad though, the sudden, and that is a whole different story.
Yeah.
Just not knowing what's happening, trying to deal with it, trying to come to grips with it. When with my grandma, your grandparents, it's much more like, okay, I can prepare myself for this. So almost to a point, and like it sounds heartless, but like I didn't my dad's parents died when I was a baby. I don't know. I don't remember them at all. But my dad's uncle, my grandpa's twin brother, I kind of thought of as a grandpa growing up. And they passed away within a 2 year span of each other. And I remember hearing about it, and I never really got super emotional about it. I was like crying about it because it was just kind of like, yeah, I figured that was coming, and it's okay. Like I kind of made peace with it over a long period of time versus sudden when it just hits you hard. So it almost feels weird not to like have that well of emotion when someone passes, but it's also like, yeah, well, I understand it, you know?
It's super strange because I mean, I guess I'm a realist overall. I'm not an optimist. I guess I lean pessimist if I'm being honest, but overall I'm just kind of a realist, a pragmatist. And people would ask me, they would check on how I was doing afterwards, which is nice of them. I'm not trying to belittle it, but there was a part of me that was like, I'm kind of just fine. If
Yeah.
anything, I'm a little bit surprised I'm not more sad. But again, in both those specific cases, and even, my aunt passed away last year, and that was more sudden. But at the same time, she'd been dealing with a laundry list of health issues for the better part of 2 years. And when we got the phone call at like 9 o'clock at night on a random night, it was unexpected and sudden. But even then, it was kind of like, maybe it's for the best. In this specific scenario, maybe that was like her quality of life had decreased to the point where maybe this was actually for the best. That's sad, and
Hmm.
obviously we wished for a better outcome. But I don't know. Again, I'm fortunate enough that I haven't had to go through a more traumatic one so far. That my experiences I have with grief have been ones I could come to terms with pretty easily, other than being just sad the person's gone.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in that sense, where really had a close family member die. My grandma upcoming year is the closest probably for me. Just I wasn't married to Courtney at the time when her dad passed, so it was close to me. It wasn't the same as a direct family member, so it'll happen someday. I know it will, and I don't know how I'm gonna react to it. I have no idea
Yeah.
whatsoever.
And we're also fortunate that it hasn't been anybody super close. Now,
Yeah,
I was pretty close to my grandparents, but they're not parents or siblings.
yeah.
We're, still relatively young, so that's not really a thing I've even really thought about. Neither of my parents are 60 yet. But it's going to happen
Hmm.
someday, or it's going to be me someday. Those might be different even if you see them coming, because that's a circle that very few get access to. But I, I don't know. So we've gone on a very strange road, a stream of consciousness that
Extreme consciousness from Burger King to the finality of life and death.
I do blame Burger King,
It's Burger King.
which means by proxy I blame you. If you hadn't knocked over those things and looked at that, we might not have gone down this road at all.
Would you like to look at a Whataburger set of coupons instead?
We don't have one up here.
Oh, okay.
That's why you mentioned like In and Out. I was like, oh yeah, maybe we'll have one of those one day, because I would go to In and Out maybe
Popeyes?
like once a month.
Popeyes?
I don't think we have a Popeyes. We have a
Hmm.
Chick-fil-A.
There you go. Okay. Well, they don't make Chick-fil-A coupons, so you're out of luck.
Right, because they don't need to. They
Exactly.
they get plenty of business. That's actually the reason I don't go there, because that's another place I might go once every couple months. But it's always like so busy. We only have the one, and I guess there's one on campus, but I'm certainly not going there. So like it's just lined like into the street, and every time I drive past, I'm like, no.
I'll uh I'll be the Chick-fil-A endorser right now. Get the app. Just put it on your phone. Get the app. It's so fast.
Yeah, the places that have done that are certainly going up in my book.
Yeah.
It's very convenient, and yeah, they get a bit of my personal information, so I guess it's a trade-off some might not be comfortable with. But for me, and even if it's not an app, just a good online experience is I'm not gonna say a must. I'll call, place an order if it's good, but if I can put an order in and walk in, pick up my order, and walk out, and that takes 2 seconds, that's a
Yeah.
major win.
It's pretty helpful. It's pretty nice to be able to just be like, all right, I want this, and it'll be ready in 5 minutes. All right, I'm on my way.
So we went full circle. We came in with no plan. The nice thing is, Dave of 2012 would have been horrified by the prospect of this. And in this one, I was like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'll start it off, and we'll see where it goes. And how you
We'll
even
get
took
some.
point on a couple of them. Why so weird? Because again, we're kind of recording this last minute. We fit one in because I didn't want to miss 2 straight weeks. If you've been on the video version, you've seen the title. If you're on the audio version, you haven't. But essentially, no show next Tuesday. I'm going to be out of town. I won't be back until Wednesday. So this episode was not live. It just aired at the usual Tuesday slot. On the podcast, of course, it aired on Thursday. No show next week. We'll be back the week of Labor Day with a new episode. It's possible it could be trivia, but we'll have to see what happens when I get back in town.
You know, Sean shouldn't even be allowed on trivia. He could have done this week's show. He could have come in with all sorts of deep thoughts, and instead he chickened out. So mad. Like I was just talking about not being angry, but now I'm angry. Because I'm ending this thing.
Now we're polarized.
Sean made me angry.
You should tell him about that afterwards.
I will.
So anyways, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a regular episode. It'll be live. Don't know for sure what it'll be yet. We'll figure that out once I get back. But regular service will resume, and then in between episodes, because you got 2 weeks, you can check us out on our website, objectionnetwork.com, or youtube.com/objectionnetwork. The one thing that will continue while I'm gone is the Ace Attorney series. We're almost to the end. I think we have like 3 or 4 weeks left by the time this airs, and we've got them all recorded. It's a sprint to the finish. If you've been following it, just know that it gets even more interesting down the road. So check it out. We'll see you in a couple weeks.